You're listening to Nutrition Matters podcast with Paige Smathers, registered dietitian nutritionist. Nutrition Matters podcast explores how to approach food and your body in a whole new way. I interview people who share stories and expertise in rejecting diet culture, making peace with food, and discovering a more positive, realistic, and sustainable approach to health and well-being. I'm Paige Smathers, registered dietitian nutritionist, and owner of Positive Nutrition, an in-person nutrition therapy practice in Salt Lake City, Utah. I offer free resources, including this podcast, a blog, and posts on social media. If you're local to Salt Lake City, check out our services and availability for appointments, and keep your eyes out for in-person groups on mindfulness, intuitive eating, body image resilience, and more. Go to positive-nutrition.com and hit subscribe if you'd like to keep in touch. I also offer online courses covering topics like the science of nutrition, mindfulness, and healing your relationship with food. Check those out at positive-nutrition.com/academy. If you like what you hear on the podcast, you can make a difference by leaving a review, sharing with friends and family, or making a donation. Thank you so much for your support. You can also find me on Instagram or Facebook if you'd like to have a little more food for thought at Paige Smathers RD. Thank you so much for listening. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Nutrition Matters podcast. My name is Paige, and I'm your host, and I'm thrilled to bring you this conversation about pregnancy and postpartum body image, where I spoke with Katie Lynch, who is a therapist and also a new mom of two young girls. We talk about kind of what you can expect and why it's hard and what the struggles are and some ideas for navigating this time of life that's both incredibly joyful and wonderful and also hard and messy. It's all of the above. So we talk about that today in today's episode, and I know that part of why I podcast is kind of trying to put stuff out into the world that I think that I think I could have used in various stages of my life and also in future stages of life as well. So that's one of those things with today's episode. It's kind of a nod to, I'm the mom of two young kids, but they're a little bit older. So I've been out of the postpartum period for a number of years now. And so, man, I just wish that I had been able to listen to some dialogue and conversation about what to expect and why this is hard and how to navigate body image stuff, because so much of what our culture throws at new moms and pregnant women is this idea that you have to have your body, quote unquote, body back immediately. And it's just so toxic and so tricky to disentangle yourself from those messages. So that's our goal today, is to provide you with a little food for thought there. Also, one of the biggest questions that I get as a dietitian is, especially from parents, is, okay, so I've learned this stuff about how to have a healthy relationship with food myself, and I'm starting to really understand this, but how do I translate this into how I parent and how I raise children, or how I interact with the kids in my life as a parent or as a loved one or a teacher or a friend? And that is a really good question, because so many of us kind of recognize, gosh, there were things that happened in my childhood that maybe were well-intentioned things, but that ended up kind of causing stress and strain in my relationship with food and body. And then it kind of causes us to think, well, gosh, what do I need to do differently? Because so much of how we parent or interact with children is how other adults interacted with us in our childhood. So a lot of us kind of recognize this need to stop this chain, but we want to find a better way. So that's why I created my Raising Intuitive Eaters 5-part online course. This is all about navigating those exact questions, like how do I raise children who feel good about their bodies when I struggle with mine myself? Or how do I actually, the very practical task of actually feeding my children, how do I do that in a way that promotes their health and well-being, but doesn't kind of contribute to developing issues around food? And let me be very clear, parents are not solely responsible by any means for any of us developing issues with food, but we can help prevent and we can increase our awareness of these things. So I go through and I talk about way early years and then into teenage years, kind of navigating these questions about how do I feed my kids? How do I talk about food? How do I talk about health? How do I talk about bodies? How do I model this when I myself might be struggling? So if you're interested in that online course, or if you'd like to kind of learn more about it, you can go to positive-nutrition.com and then click on Academy and then scroll down to the Intuitive Eaters course. There you'll find more information. You'll be able to see what all the lessons are about and kind of get a feel for what to expect. So I'm really proud of what I put together there, and I thought I would mention it before this podcast episode just because it's super relevant to the topic at hand. And with that, I really hope you enjoy me and Katie sitting down and discussing pregnancy and postpartum body image. And thanks again for being here and for all your support. Don't forget to rate and review the podcast. And if you'd like to support the podcast, you can click the link in the show notes. And at $5 a month, you are able to access 3 extra episodes per month. One is a guided meditation, one is a Q&A, and one is a nutrition lesson every month. So if that sounds interesting to you, please feel free to head to the show notes and click become a supporter. And with that, let's talk with Katie. Hi, Katie. Welcome to Nutrition Matters podcast, and thanks so much for joining me.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here. I really appreciate getting asked to join you.
Yeah, well, we've connected online, and you talk about some really important things just from the perspective of being a therapist and also a human. And I thought, okay, let's get together and talk about body image and the postpartum period, because that is very much on your mind right now. Is that right?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I'm 10 weeks out right now with my new baby. And also have a 2-year-old. So I still kind of feel like I'm in the postpartum period with her too, even though some people might disagree with that. But I still feel very much like a new mother to both of them.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So talk about who you are and kind of your background, what you do professionally, and then we'll dive into our topic.
Sounds good. So I am a licensed clinical social worker, and I used to say I was a licensed clinical social worker in Louisiana, but I just moved to Tennessee. But for the last almost 10 years, I've been in New Orleans, Louisiana, and that's where I got my graduate degree, and just moved to Chattanooga, Tennessee to be closer to my family while I raise these 2 girls. My husband moved, we're all together, but my family lives here. And so right now I'm not working a whole lot. I'm seeing a few clients like in a teletherapy capacity from home. So that's what's happening right now. But what led me to this work and journey, I around the age 14, 15, I started struggling with OCD related issues and started going to therapy, and loved therapy and knew that it was probably going to be a calling and passion for me, and it has been. And so I went to college, studied psychology. OCD got better for the most part. And then when I went to grad school, I started becoming really interested in addictions and still anxiety and depression related issues. And once I graduated grad school and started my first few jobs, I started really obsessively kind of restricting. And once, yes, food. And once I started that lasted for about 3 years. And I mean, after that, I started to get help for it. And once I, I didn't do an inpatient program, but I did IOP stuff. And that led me, recovering myself has led me to being really, really interested in eating disorder recovery and body image recovery for everybody. And then in a broader topic, just disordered eating and health in general, because I think it's something everybody faces, even if they're not clinically struggling with an eating disorder of some kind. And also my eating disorder wove in with OCD a lot. So that's what led me to my place. And still feel really passionate about, working in that area, especially with having baby girls.
Yeah. Okay, so you have your own history, and then you've had years of studying in school and then working as a therapist and then becoming a new mom. Talk about anything relevant in your story as far as like what's it been like to be in recovery or recovered. I'm not sure what wording you like to use, but from an eating disorder and then kind of going into new phases of life like motherhood and postpartum.
Yeah. So part of my story, it has been that I knew that I wanted to be a mom, but I also knew that I couldn't be a mom unless I was recovered from my eating disorder. And so that is what led me to seeking out help because I knew at some point I wanted to have children. And so basically, after I got married, I realized that it wasn't just an I want to be thin for my wedding issue. It was a bigger issue for me. And decided then, so I was 2016. So 3.5 years ago, I decided that I wanted to make this better for myself so that I don't pass on like really toxic ways of thinking to children. And so that is what led me to that was like kind of the catalyst that threw me into recovery. And so I got really lucky. I do identify as recovered. I certainly struggle sometimes, but I don't utilize behaviors in the slightest any longer. And most of my thoughts I'm able to kind of zap pretty quickly when they come up. Once I did get help, I got pregnant pretty quickly after that. So about a year, it wasn't very long. Yeah, about a year after I started feeling much more normal and better, I got pregnant. And obviously, weight gain is a huge component of getting pregnant and the postpartum period. And while that was hard for me, it also felt really okay at the same time.
Okay, wait, before you keep going there, I just want to hit on something that a listener might be feeling. So, and again, like talking about motherhood or parenting, like it's potentially like pretty tricky. We might run into people comparing or people feeling like they're doing it wrong or people feeling shame. So as you were sharing your story right there, I just kind of wanted to draw out this idea of like what you personally really felt like, gosh, before I get pregnant, I'm aware that this is a problem and I really want to work on this. What if someone listening is like, I am a parent and I'm still working on this. Like, what's wrong with me? I'm feeling shame about this. What would you want them to know?
I would say that recognizing at any stage in your life is going to be helpful for you and anyone around you. And I'm just lucky in the sense that I was able to notice it at that young of an age and also was really immersed in it because I was a therapist, right? So
Yeah.
I'm around all these people and, doing these groups at my job that, I was leading a body image group and I was like, wow, like this is really hard for me to lead. And, for me, I think unfortunately most people, don't have access or the support that I did at that time to be able to make choices to recover. And I also had like so much more knowledge, I think, than the average person because of the what I'm trained in, like therapy is my thing, right? And
Yeah,
so
plus your experience like in your younger years of being in
yes,
therapy too and being
yes,
aware of kind of like
right,
problematic patterns that you probably
right,
started to notice.
right.
Yeah. Yeah, and that all makes total sense. I just wanted you to speak to that because, I'm sensitive about sensitive topics, and like I
Right.
can't think of one that potentially is more sensitive than this one that we'll be talking about today. So
Right.
I'll do my best to kind of like think through what someone listening might be wondering or might be feeling. But I also just want to encourage the listener, like you're sharing your story, you're sharing your expertise also, and just if shame is creeping into this conversation, like that is not the goal. And and like,
It's definitely not the goal.
yeah, no, definitely not. And I love what you said, like at any phase you're going to help yourself, any
Mhm.
phase of your life that you choose to recover or that you're able to work on recovery is the right time, right?
Even if like that happens to be when you're 40, 50, 60, 70. like your children are not damaged by anything that you did to them or did not do because you've struggled with your eating disorder, if you have one, like people are resilient. I was raised in a home where there wasn't a whole lot of diet talk, but it was still immersed in me. And to me, that didn't have a bearing on like my ability to be a resilient person,
Yeah.
And I just, for me, my thoughts felt so toxic and so scary. And with like the knowledge that I had that I was struggling so much, I didn't want to pass it on knowingly,
Right. And how beautiful that could be a catalyst for
Right.
you, right? That hope
Yeah.
of your future children.
Right. And I do think that, it's so confusing for so many people because so much of, what people struggle with eating wise is under the guise of health, like I would say like, the health wellness boom has made it really complicated and confusing for people to know what to do with that. And so while everyone, and part of my story is like, I thought I was just being healthy, like I thought I was just doing my best to take care of myself. And it led into a huge issue.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Thank you. And I just think that for most people, it probably starts, nobody ever starts off like, oh, I want to struggle with this, but it starts in a way of I'm doing my best to take care of myself, and meet some needs and are not being met. And, I think that we are all just doing our best with all the information that's out there in the world. And unfortunately, a lot of that information, is fueled by like the diet industry trying to make us feel that we need to eat a certain way and be different. And it makes us not trust ourselves. And I think that can be really confusing, and
Yeah.
because I know for me, like I didn't start off just saying I was dieting. I was saying like I'm trying to eat better and eat healthier and be better and stronger and happier. And what that looked like for me might look really different for somebody, but I think that the intention might be really similar. And I just realized, it took a while. It took like 3.5 years to realize that, well, this actually isn't me just eating healthy. It's me being controlled by, an eating disorder voice.
Yeah, that's
So
a great point.
Yeah, I think that's maybe not most of the way that people, it happens to people, but I do think that happens often.
Yeah.
That's the way it starts.
Yeah, for sure. Like those innocent sort of like, I read this somewhere, or I want to work on this like seemingly innocent thing, and it can feel like such a slippery slope from there.
Right. Especially if you do have a history of obsessive traits and or a history of, struggling in some way, kind of an addictive capacity. And I don't think food is addictive, but I do think that for me and for a lot of people, having like a quick relief was addictive. And that's kind of like what fueled my disorder was, trying to numb my feelings as much as I possibly could.
Yeah.
Whether that's what I started off doing, no. I was just like, I'm going to cut this out to feel better. And it led to a more, if I don't cut this out, I won't feel okay type of emotion.
Okay, so we got off on this little tangent there because of me, but you were about to kind of talk about what it was like to be pregnant and in the postpartum period.
Yes. So, I struggled with pregnancy, not really because of, I had very healthy pregnancies. I was really lucky, but being pregnant was really uncomfortable for me, physically and mentally and emotionally. I don't really feel like myself when I'm pregnant. It truly feels like a life force has overtaken, which it has. But some people say that they don't even notice feeling pregnant until, 8 months in. That's definitely not how I feel. I feel kind of the minute it happens that I'm pregnant, and I get all the symptoms. So pregnancy is hard, and then postpartum for me is hard. My first postpartum experience was tough in like a myriad of ways, but I'm really like feel lucky to say that because I felt fairly strong in recovery, I wasn't hard on myself body image wise. It it felt kind of natural to be in a place of like, well, this is what my body is supposed to be doing. Like, it's okay that I'm not, quote unquote fit and thin right now. So in some ways, pregnancy and the postpartum period allowed me to relax a bit because it felt like there's a reason and it's okay. Versus just being like a regular non-pregnant and or postpartum person, that to me, that feels like there's more pressure there to actually look a certain way. I feel like the world gives a little bit of a break to a pregnant woman and then a postpartum woman, but at some point that break is no longer, and people start asking you, or start making comments about your body soon after. For me, the emotional components of the postpartum was hard. And then sometimes with that, like that would land on my body. So if I was anxious or depressed for, weeks or a month, it would then, kind of spiral. And I would feel like, well, maybe if I were in better shape or if I had lost the weight, I would feel better. So I'd have thoughts like that would come in.
Set the stage for like why
Yeah.
the postpartum period is like difficult mentally.
Yeah.
If you've never been in that position, I think sometimes it can be hard to understand. And maybe I'll add some thoughts too, because I've also been in
Yeah.
postpartum periods, and yeah, it's a whirlwind. So go ahead. I'd love to hear what you think.
Well, I think, so definitely the first time was harder for me than this last time. I don't know if for me in my life, there's been anything more emotionally challenging than going from 0 kids to 1 child. There's nothing to me that felt more like a roller coaster in my life. As happy as I was, and it was also really terrifying and kind of a time that it's just like, when you want to be somebody who's in control, you just essentially have none. And there was so much change and transition all at once. And it's almost like from one day to the next, your life is completely different.
Yeah,
And
and
it's
they
always
just
going to be
send you
different.
home with this baby, and they don't even give you a manual, right?
Right.
They're like,
There's
here
no
you go.
manual. No one is telling you like what to do when this happens, or like if they don't sleep, what you should do. And, and there's so much emphasis on the care of the baby and like no emphasis on the care of the mom or the parents, that feels really complicated. For the last like 9 months, you had these, prenatal checkups every month, and then you're just sent home and you get one more checkup and that's it. And that feels really confusing and weird and hard because that's essentially when all the hard part starts.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would add too that like I felt like there was so much anticipation for having the baby and like thinking
Mhm.
about the actual delivery and
Mhm.
all of that stuff. Like for me, that was top of mind and kind of
Right.
scary and kind of
Yeah.
like unknown. And I knew it was going to hurt really, really bad, you
Right.
know, and kind of wondering like what's going to happen to my actual like body. Like, is it
Yeah.
going to be irreparably damaged? Like, I don't know. Like, there's so much uncertainty, right?
Yes.
Um, I thought about that a lot, and then it was kind of like, whoa, now she's here, and now I haven't really, not that I hadn't thought about the postpartum period, but I hadn't given it as much time in my head as I had the delivery. And
Mhm.
meanwhile, it's like, okay, now life starts and now they're here and now you're feeding them and you're not sleeping. So for me, the lack of sleep,
Mhm.
I'm pretty wimpy about sleep.
Yes.
I,
I don't think anybody is wimpier than me.
okay, yeah, you might win. I'm pretty wimpy. So when I like didn't really sleep much and I was up all night, and when it felt great to get like a 15-minute stretch of sleep, like honestly, like that's kind of how it was for me in the beginning.
God.
I'm listening
I'm
to her
so sorry.
breathing.
Truly.
Yeah, it was a lot. And then what happened for me, like this is kind of where I'm getting to, is like self-care for me was sort of like during the day, during the waking hours, I'm starving, but
Hmm.
I'm so tired. And when I finally had free hands, or, a baby down, whatever, it was like, okay, do I eat or do I sleep? You know?
Or
And
do I take a shower? And I
right.
never take a shower.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So
I
it
totally
kind of
agree.
becomes this like your just basic needs are so thrown off,
Yes.
plus all the hormones, plus all the uncertainty, plus all the I think there's also, especially in this day and age, there's so much information
Too
about
much
how it
information.
should look,
Mm.
and then there's just information overload, not enough checking in with your own like internal sense of like what's right for you and your family. So yeah, it's really that's kind of how I would characterize my experiences. It's like, and I think I had it fairly good, but I could see how all of that stuff that isn't even really like body image related, I could see how someone could kind of almost kind of encapsulate those concerns and that uncertainty in their body and be like, well, if I just had it all together, quote unquote, with my body, like maybe these concerns wouldn't be nagging at me so much. It's kind of an easy thing to blame.
Yes, exactly. And an easier thing for me or other women maybe to focus on versus the harder stuff, right? Like it feels easier to focus on losing weight than it is to think about how I have to wake up in 15 minutes or how I haven't slept in 3 days or my milk isn't coming in or I can't breastfeed, like all those things. I think a lot of it feels like this distraction of weight loss or of focusing on my body feels quote unquote easier than all this other stuff. So I'm going to take a break and focus on that. And that will give me this illusion of control.
Yeah, that's a great
That's a
point.
good.
Yeah, definitely. This illusion of control is I think what pretty much all food stuff boils down to, right? Like we want to be in control,
Yeah.
but
Safety. Mm.
but we're then we end up being controlled by that.
Right. Oh, 100%. I know. I remember thinking like talking to my dietitian several years ago, and I was like, well, it just makes me feel better and safer to like know exactly what I'm eating, how much it is, X, Y, and Z. And she's like, that really sounds like the food has control over you. And I was so offended. And I was like, what are you talking about? And she's like, well, it doesn't sound like that's you in control. And it just, there are sometimes they say those things in those moments and they like change everything for you. And that was one of them that changed it for me, thinking about that.
Yeah. And it's sometimes those moments where you get a little offended, but
Hmm.
where
Oh,
you're
like
kind of
like
pull
a
back.
very good confrontation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, she did a good job.
So let's talk about uh, this pressure new moms feel to quote get their body back. Like this
Mhm.
almost feels like a cliche conversation for me at this point. Like it's just, oh my gosh, of course this is a crazy idea, and of course like we need
Mhm.
to give ourselves a break. But I also recognize not everybody's in my little bubble,
Right.
and we like let's hit on this because this
Yeah.
is real. This is a real pressure people feel, and we need to talk about it. So go ahead.
Yes, I totally agree. It feels like, not no one really thinks that anymore, right? Or like they don't actually feel that they have to lose their weight in a certain amount of time. And sometimes I even have to check in with myself. And I'm not, on a quest to lose weight. I'm not on a quest to change anything at the moment, but there are times where I'm like, well, I don't look the same, right? Or I don't look the way I looked prior to getting pregnant, or, all those types of thoughts. And when you live in such a diet culture and a fasted world, it feels really challenging to separate, well, what is good and healthy for me versus what's the noise. That pressure is truly based on companies trying to profit off of all of our fears and insecurities. And there's not any basis to like what your body should or should not look like, in your postpartum period. Some women don't struggle with this. Some women go back to the way they were, immediately. Some people never go back to the way they were, and there's nothing to say that like you should or shouldn't be in either position, right? And I think that it's a really, really hard thing for women to have to go through during this transitional period because there's so much happening emotionally, there's so much happening. Hormonally, there's so much happening. Physically, your body is doing all these things. If you're breastfeeding, like that's happening. If you're in pain from your incisions, that's happening. Like there's so much going on that there's like this one more thing's like, oh, in addition to doing all these things, you also have to be, at your best again physically. And it's truly painfully exhausting. And so, for me and for the women that I work with who are going through this period, my question is like, would you, would you be as hard on yourself as you would be, or would you be as hard on a friend as you are to yourself? Would you be as hard on, if you have a daughter that you would be to yourself? The answer is always no, but when it comes to ourselves, we have this insane pressure to almost like be perfect. And sometimes I think it's obviously there's societal pressure, but I think so much of it is from ourselves. So much of it is from these beliefs that we, have been entrenched in, that women are supposed to do it all and look great while doing it. And that is just so harmful to all of us. And for me, personally, when I start to feel that way, the thing that I struggle with the most is recognizing that I don't have to do things the way everybody's doing them. And I'm allowed to make decisions for me that feel right, even if no one else is doing that. And that's like my practice for myself. But I know that that is so challenging and so hard. And I'm also really lucky to have, a husband and friends and family around me who don't talk about those things. But the rest of the world may be in places where that is constantly talked about. And that there's just like, I just have so much empathy for it because it is just so hard. There's so much happening during the postpartum period that trying to get your body, quote unquote, back should not even cross anyone's brain. But it is.
Like, and here's the thing, your body has changed because it birthed a human. Like, how beautiful and how amazing. And and you've changed, and we always in the process.
That it seems like, yeah, I mean, like you're supposed to, like you're supposed to be different. You're physically different. Your body is inherently changed. And I think what we all get really stuck on is the aesthetics of our body versus like the functionality of it, like our body is different and it just birthed a human and just took all of this, just worked so hard, our muscles, our organs, all of that has been working overtime and so hard for us. And then we're like, well, what is that extra, whatever on my body, like, what is this? Why we were just so hard on it versus looking at it from this place of gratitude and strength. And I think that like having that dialogue would be really helpful for people to, to kind of shift this narrative of like our body is supposed to be aesthetically pleasing versus our body is a source of functionality so that we can create and live and do and create humans if you choose to, and I think that it's just all really hard. It's just really hard.
Yeah, it is really hard. But I think as like a tip, I would recommend, sitting with like what your body just did, like just kind of going off of what you just said, the functionality of it, like how miraculous and beautiful and amazing that all you had to do was eat food and rest and your body made a human.
Right.
And you are forever changed. Your body is forever changed. Your life is forever changed. And that's the nature of this whole endeavor called life and called creating life. So we wouldn't want to go back to our old selves in any other way. Like, right? Like we're changed for the better. This is a beautiful transition. And yeah, it's hard, but like it's hopefully, an overall positive in our life. But why, what's with the, like, my body should look the same after, but nothing else about me
Nothing
is the
else
same
about
after.
me is the same now.
Right? Like that, like, let's think about that. That doesn't even really make a lot of sense.
Right.
And, when it's hard to exist in a body that has changed, and I get that. Like that is hard.
Mm-hmm.
There's some things you can do that are going to be helpful for you. So I wanted to provide some like kind of just basic like self-care tips around what you can do. So first of all, wear comfortable clothes. Like don't try on your clothes from before pregnancy. Like just like it's okay to wear sweats, it's okay to wear pajamas, it's okay to wear big huge t-shirts that you just like hang around the house and whatever. Like you don't need to be all quote unquote put together in this postpartum period or even whenever. Like you don't have to anytime, but especially then. Like give yourself a little bit of a break. Wear clothes that are comfortable for you. Um, what else would you add to that idea of like wearing comfortable clothes, wearing comfortable underwear, buy new underwear that actually fits you?
I know. And I've done all of those things. And, like I do think that putting away the clothes that don't fit or maybe never will fit again, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean that in like we're all different now and that's okay. I think that that's really helpful. And also taking every day to thank your body, like give gratitude towards the places that you're struggling with, right? So like I have a lot of clients who are like, oh, my stomach doesn't look the way it used to, or oh, I don't like how my boobs set, all of these things. And I think one of the things is that we truly forget the function of what it's done for us. And so thanking it for existing, thanking it for providing nourishment for my child if you're breastfeeding. Thank you for providing a safe home for my child. If you had a baby, if you birthed your baby, those types of things, giving it gratitude, I think it allows your mind to shift quickly. I also love the idea of, like lots of sensory things. Like for me in my postpartum period, like I definitely wear the pajamas every day. I wear the leggings. I don't try to put on jeans. Also doing stuff that just feels good, right? So like I smell candles a lot because I need that to breathe, to feel good. When I have time, I'll take a bath, right? Like I know as a new mom, there's not a whole lot of time for all this stuff, but these are the smaller things that I do think make a difference. For me, like it can be even putting like eye cream on, it's just the things that physically feel good on my skin and my body, that don't make me focus on the changes or the weight or the shape or whatever that means. Um, Also lots of water. That really helps me feel clearer and also just feel more energized. And just the process of intaking that just feels good to me too. But I do love the idea of like trying to be as comfortable as possible. And when you can, truly rest. Like I think that we as moms, new moms, are trying to do so much when we need to learn how to be more, being versus doing. And I think the postpartum period if we can give ourselves that grace, is a really good time for that.
Yeah, I love that. It's okay to just be, and
Yeah.
just you
And
being
you're
is
doing so much.
very productive. Yeah.
Right. It's not like you're lying on the couch for, 20 days in a row, right? Like, which would be so fabulous. I can't even begin to tell.
That would be so great. That would just
Mm-mm,
be
mm-mm.
amazing. I
I
would
was
also
telling my
say,
husband, like,
oh, go ahead.
oh, not that long ago. So we decided to leave New Orleans about 4 weeks after my baby was born, which was crazy. And it's a long story, but I remember telling him, like, I kind of wish, like, after I give birth, I could have like 2 weeks to like just be by myself, like obviously I want to see my baby, but I also want to do the things that I haven't been able to do. I want to like be comfortable, like physically comfortable. I want to sleep because at the end of pregnancy, you're not sleeping, your stomach hurts. I have had acid reflux, like there were so many physically painful things that were happening that I just kind of wanted 2 weeks to chill. And he's like, yeah, I don't think I can give that to you. Right. But, you just move from one thing so quickly to the next. And as women, I think, we're not used to resting the way that we need to, and giving, and mostly
That's a good
giving
point.
ourselves that compassion to be able to rest.
That is
Hard.
such a great point. Yeah, like like the way you need to rest in the postpartum period may be very, very foreign, maybe a very foreign concept to you.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
love that.
and I wish it weren't because I know we all really need it, you know, like more than I think at any other point. But when you can, like giving yourself permission, like it's okay to watch TV, and like lay on the couch with your baby, like it's all right, you know. It's okay to order Postmates if you need to and not cook dinner ever. You know what I mean? Those things, like just giving ourselves a little bit more wiggle room to not have to be or to feel that we need to be doing everything like quote unquote perfect, whatever that means, anyways.
Yeah, that's such a great point. I also want to add from a nutrition perspective. I mentioned earlier that part of how I felt in the very early like days and weeks after giving birth is just this mental conundrum of do I sleep or do I eat? Because I was so
Mm-hmm.
tired. And again, like this wasn't really even coming from like a body image perspective. It was just like, okay, I only have so much time. What's my highest priority? you know?
Right.
Um, and my first postpartum period, I think I messed up there a little bit. I think like as I reflected on it, it was like, oh, I felt like way worse because I wasn't probably staying on top of eating actual like solid
Meals.
satisfying meals, and I was
Right.
just like reaching for like something
Anything. Mm-hmm.
quick so that I
Yep.
could quick and go to sleep. And not that it's bad to eat something quick, but just from the perspective of it wasn't probably enough food for me.
Mm-hmm.
And also for me, I was very disoriented in terms of like what day is it? What time is it? Like, I don't know. It just felt very disoriented. So my
Totally.
second time around, I tried to stay more on top of like having somewhat of a meal structure and somewhat of a, like a, okay, I don't care how tired I am going to make myself like a solid, satisfying lunch. And I'm going to, whatever, I'm going to prioritize eating. And it's really important to remember that, like, early on in the postpartum period, however your baby came out of your body, you are healing and you need nutrition to do that. You
Mm-hmm.
need regular, satisfying,
Yes.
adequate, yummy meals to help your body heal from what it just
And
went through.
and often too,
Yeah.
like consistently throughout the day.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, like
No
regular,
matter how
satisfying
little you're
meals.
sleeping or, like we just, that's why, like we all feel, I think, pretty like delusional after that period because no, like you said, like our basic needs aren't being met, and that can make us feel really, really, like not normal and in the slightest. And for me, that was just such a shocking point, both postpartum's like, wow, like, you're spending so much time constantly caring for this infant and making sure all their basic needs are met. And like, no one's doing that for us, right? And like, we have to do that for ourselves, of course, but it feels really, really challenging when you feel like you can't and picking like, well, what do I need more? Like food or sleep or a shower.
Yeah, and my whole point in bringing that up is just
Yeah.
like your nutrition is a
So,
really, really, really big part of what is going to help your brain function, what's going to help you sleep, what's going to help you make milk if you're breastfeeding, what's going to help your body heal. Like it's very easy to kind of put it on the back burner, and maybe even some body image stuff sneaks in as you're just so dang tired and dealing with all of that. But just remembering like having somewhat of a plan or a structure in place of like, okay, I am
mhm.
committed to meeting my nutritional needs in the postpartum period. It's hard whether or not body image stuff creeps in. But if you're like have this extra pressure of, all right, gotta get my body quote unquote back, it's just I could see how that could be way, way, way more difficult to feed yourself adequately. And then at the same time, we have to really start to think, okay, what does like what does it mean if I withhold adequate nutrition from myself? What does that like what's the consequence of that? Right?
Mhm.
Like
For sure.
potentially all kinds of things that I just listed that could be helped by eating adequately. Like that could be that could put yourself in a really, not ideal situation in the postpartum period from lots of different angles, lots of different perspectives.
No matter what was going on, we would make sure that like our child was being fed adequately, or your friend or your mom, like if somebody else was going through something so big, food is a priority and food is healing. Like we need food like we need water, like we need air, like we need sleep. And in that postpartum period of so much emotional upheaval and change and physical upheaval and change, like giving yourself like constant nourishment is like such a gift to give yourself. And certainly would be very challenging and can be challenging for people who do struggle with their body image or eating disorders, eating related issues in general. And it feels like moms or new parents like almost need people to be caring for them in that period too, because we
Yeah.
tend to not have, have the ability to do that sometimes when it's us, when you're going through a trauma, like all that change.
So that's a great point. Like, as we're talking about having a plan for trying to care for yourself, I think a big, huge component of that is allowing other people to help you, allowing other people
Yes.
to care for you, because this is a time of your life where you really can't, very likely, you really can't meet all your needs by yourself. Like, you will need help.
Right.
And that's a thing, I in retrospect, I wish I had gone through this in my head as I was thinking about delivery and, all that stuff that was happening in my brain before this transition. I wish that I had sort of done a better job of kind of saying, okay, what will I do when people want to help? What will come up for me? What will I
Mm.
feel? Why will that feel uncomfortable for me? How will I work through that? So I encourage anyone listening who's maybe going to be going down this road, like, start to think about that before you're in the situation, because it might shock you how tough it can be to
Right.
accept help.
So it's just so interesting how much, you know, care you get during your, pregnancy and however you're delivering your child, if it, if you're having a delivery, and then how so much of it is like, okay, now figure it out yourself, right? And if I were to do it again, which I don't think I'm doing it again, and my second time was different in that way that I knew going into having a second baby, like I need more help. And that's what made me move to Chattanooga. It wasn't, I mean, I wanted more support, I wanted more help with children. And I'm lucky that I could move and do that for myself and my family. But even kind of at like, easier level for people who are maybe about to give birth or about to have children, my friends did a meal train for me. And that was a really useful thing in the first like 2 weeks postpartum. Like I had dinner delivered to my door every night. And that was amazing. It was something I didn't have to think about.
What wonderful friends. That's awesome.
Yes, definitely. So lucky. And so that is like a helpful way if you or your friends or, someone who's about to have a baby, like that's a very useful thing. Or, you know, sending them, a $20 Starbucks card, like stuff like that is so helpful to new parents because their needs are being met last. Um, and just to have one less thing to think about is kind of a new parent's dream.
Absolutely. I love it. And actually, one of my very favorite dinners that I still make to this day, someone made for me when I had my second baby and brought over. And I was like, what is this? This is so yummy. So there's an
I
advantage
know,
of also
so
like,
true.
yeah,
Mhm.
like maybe finding some fun new recipes too.
Yes. I mean, and then like, if you get to see your friends, if you want to, or you have them leave it at the door, so that for me, my postpartum period, like there was a bit of like feeling isolated. And then if you're having someone come over and bringing you food, you at least get some adult interaction, which is really helpful for new parents too. Like your whole world is shifted. Sometimes it's really nice just to, see one of your friends and chill for 20 minutes if that's possible.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so great. So what else is there to talk about in this topic of the postpartum period and body image and kind of maybe some tips or some ideas of things to think about if this is someone's situation right now, or if this is something that's a listener is planning in the future? What else do you want people to know?
I think that my feedback slash advice for anyone who wants to do this or is doing it is to give yourself as much grace and compassion, but also try to, kind of preventively support yourself. So when I was in New Orleans, I wrote down a list for myself, and one of them was like, when your baby comes, like, remember this won't always feel so hard, right? So like those first few months feel really hard because everything feels really different. And letting myself know that it won't always be this hard was really helpful for me. But second time around, I set up things in place to help me. And so taking some of those things, so for example, like I created appointments with my psychiatrist like early on. I was like, I want to have a check-in right after, I give birth. I want to make sure that like I want a postpartum checkup earlier than 6 weeks. Like there were certain things that helped me this time that I didn't do the first time that were helpful. Like, and so kind of creating, like thanking your past self for looking out for you. Maybe that's setting up like, doing your nails like 3 weeks after the baby comes, and you physically are able, like kind of giving yourself moments to feel more like yourself again, which can just feel necessary. One of the things that I've also have tried to do for myself as well as other people who are in this period too is recognizing that there is no wrong way to do this, to be a parent for the most part. And so giving yourself permission to do things differently from other people.
Yeah. Whether that's eating, whether that's parenting,
Yeah.
whether that's
I know
sleeping.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Whatever that is for you. Like, I know that I need 9 hours of sleep.
I
I
do
know how
too.
that sounds.
No, I
I
do
know that,
too. 9 hours.
and instead of fighting who I am, I just have to know I need 9 hours. And so while I don't get 9 hours straight, I have to get 9 hours at some point during the day. And it's like it's not something I won't feel good. I won't be good to other people if that doesn't happen. So not being mad at yourself and being mean to yourself for who you are, and recognizing that it's okay that those are some of your needs, right? And knowing that we're all human and we're all just like trying to work through this process, which is probably one of the hardest things you will do. And learning that like all those things, like those like quote unquote self-care things, like you do need those, right? Like we don't just talk about that like for fun. Like we need moments that are purely for ourselves, purely for enjoyment, and purely for fun and for bliss. And especially in those first like 3 months, like rest.
Yeah.
And really granting it to yourself and not feeling so much shame around, oh, well, she only sleeps 6 hours. What's wrong with me? Which I did to myself and I still do sometimes. That like nature of comparison I think is what gets us the most.
Yeah. Yeah. And part of that can come in a big way on social media. If you need to take a break
Sure.
from social media during this time because too much
Mm-hmm.
comparison is creeping in, like that's
Mm-hmm.
potentially really, really powerful move you could make that could be really
Right.
impactful for your mental well-being, and also even maybe your time to actually take a shower or
Yes,
do the
for
things you
sure.
need to do.
Sometimes mindless scrolling is great and sometimes it's not, and it can be really a service to yourself to know when you need a break from it. If
Absolutely.
social media is a stressor for you. And I think it is for most people at some point.
Yeah, and like you could see how, that period, a postpartum period could just put you at kind of heightened
Mm-hmm.
risk for
Right.
feeling comparison or for feeling like you're not measuring up or, yeah.
And I think also like to keep in mind that like it's okay if you're not happy and enjoying it all the time. you know, like I think there's an illusion that like we're supposed to just feel really blissful and joyful all the time when you have a new baby. And while there are certainly moments of joy and bliss, there are also moments of exhaustion and rage and fear and anger and sadness and that's normal, you know? And I think that that needs to just be said.
Yeah, definitely. Well, great. This has been so wonderful to talk about. I think that opening the dialogue around what it's like in the postpartum period, how crazy the ideas are around bodies and getting your body back, quote unquote, like letting that go, taking care of yourself, letting other people help other people take care of you and your baby, having moments of pause and rest and joy and alone time. Like do what you can to meet those needs and see them as real needs, not just like, oh, if I get time, I'll do those things, because you never will.
Right.
And also, like, I just want to mention really quick too, like reach out for help if you are really struggling and you just can't seem to like find the light at the end of the tunnel, or if you just really feel like you need more support. That's not, you're not failing as a parent, you're not a bad person, you're not doing something wrong. You just really truly might need some help. So that's also something I just wanted to say in context of a conversation around postpartum stuff, is like it's really common to need more help.
Yes. I think that that's something, everybody would say as a new mom or even not such a new mom or anyone. It honestly, like we all need more support than what we have. And being for, giving yourself permission to ask for it. Like it's okay. It
Yeah.
really is okay. And no one judges anyone for needing support. We all need it. People often feel more free to ask for support later on when you've opened it up too.
Yeah.
It's a need, it's not an option for anyone. We all need support from other people.
Yeah, and it feels good to be like to be the friend of someone who just had a baby. It feels good to be asked, "Hey," like for your friend to say, "Hey, I need help. Like,
It
will you come
does.
over and hold my baby so that I can take a
Right.
bath?" Like, I would love that personally. Like,
Right.
anybody who's listening who's a friend of mine, like, please.
No,
I want to
it's
hold your
true.
baby.
Right.
Yeah.
It does. It helps us feel connected to other people when we ask for help, and
Yeah.
shows them that, we value them and trust them and are vulnerable enough to seek them as support. And that feels wonderful.
Definitely. Well, Katie, talk about how people can keep in touch with you and follow along with your work.
Yeah. So my website is katielynch.lcsw.com, and that is where you will find information about therapy. I do body image coaching, and then my Instagram is my name again, Katie Lynch LCSW. So I would love to have you join me and follow along. And I also really want to thank you, Paige, for inviting me to do this with you.
Well, thank you for coming on. It was so wonderful to talk about this.
Thank you. I hope everybody enjoyed it.
Well, I sincerely hope you've enjoyed this conversation. If you haven't already, please go ahead and leave a review on iTunes. Thanks again so much for listening, and we'll see you soon for another episode.